with Chris Tucker in the movie, I got to ask you, what was he up to with Jeffrey Epstein, and when is he gonna fess up, and when are we gonna know the truth about what Chris Tucker was up to with Jeffrey Epstein?
No, I don't have that answer. I'm gonna let you answer that question. I don't know.
And that, believe me, I refresh Chris Tucker's Twitter page every day, and he's not, unlike a lot of other Epstein affiliated people, they kind of have gone stealth mode and just are staying out of the limelight right now. But Chris Tucker's still out there, like, doing things and promoting it, and I'm like, I need to know why you were in Africa with Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein in 2002,
Because he was one of the biggest stars in the world. I mean, Chris Tucker, he self-destructed. He reminds me a lot of Dave Chappelle. I won't say he self-destructed. Mm-hmm. I will say that he opted out. He opted out of a what probably was a very harsh system to live up to, or an expectation to live up to at that time. I don't recall him ever wearing a dress, but there's so many. Yeah. There's so few black men.
Fifth Element.
Oh, shit.
All right, I'm excited to talk about these movies here today with you, Danielle. This is Black and White Movies. Welcome back. And today we are talking 1995's Dead Presidents and 1993's Falling Down. How are you doing, Danielle?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, man? I can't wait to jump into these.
Yeah, I'm going. But we should tell the listeners, we haven't had a chance to address the state of the world and the politics that are going on, and life's moving fast. Anything you want to just say about, because we talk about black and white issues on here, so anything, what's on your mind, like, in the state of the world?
I just want to say that everybody just hang in there. If you're not politically active, it's time for your crash course, because your life depends on it, literally, right now. And I think me and Jared have been fighting this fight for a long, long time politically, and trying to get people active in our own separate ways, fighting amongst ourselves, but mostly lining up. But it's time to pick a lane. And for everybody to really just get in there, because it's dangerous right now, actually. We're in a very peculiar state in our country. So, and we can't leave. So you're trapped. You can't leave now. So good luck.
No, Canada's not taking you or me. So,
no, yeah. Stop.
But that's right. Pick a lane. And we're talking, of course, like Black Lives Matter and just what's in the current and in the air of this whole country. And I think, like, a lot of the country's finally starting to see problems that were there all along and recognize them. Kind of the wider side of this country. Some people are having a reckoning with things that they didn't want to see before, to different extents, and things are coming to a head, and we're seeing people in the streets. So if you're out there in the streets, good on you. Thank you. And I don't know. I'm not speaking for Danielle, but the movement out there has my love and support.
Yeah, I wanna also say R.I.P. to Michael Brooks. I feel like I'm not a huge progressive. I don't think I fall in any lane, but it was a little shocking to me. But I will say that if there was a person that I listened to and heard him out, whether I agreed or not, he was always very thought out in terms of his politics, and forced me to listen to things that I didn't care about. And so, that was really shocking to hear about his death. And I don't know him personally, of course, clearly, but he affected me. And I thought that, that was a really tragic loss. So give people their flowers while they're alive, and, pay attention to your politics, folks.
Yep, because politics is paying attention to you. And
it's going to make a choice for you. Whether you want to play or not, it's playing with you right now.
Yep. And we're talking a little bit of politics today with these two movies, Dead Presidents and Fallen Down. Where do you want to start?
Let's start from the beginning. Let's start with 1993. I mean, look, these 2 years were like From 93 to 95, you have iconic movies in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
This being one of them, probably lesser well known, but it speaks so clearly to today. Pulp Fiction 94, Menace to Society 95. You have such an vast array of adult grown-up movies, not with the triple X. I mean, yes, Showgirls did come out during this time too, but you really had some important topics, and Falling Down was probably amongst one that woke me up when I was I guess I was a young person at that time, and I didn't realize probably the impact it would have later on. I think that not economically viable was the thing that stuck in my head the most.
Yeah.
Which it was a small blip on the movie, but it was a huge impact, and it kind of covered the reason why Falling Down was such an important movie was because it didn't matter about race in particular. It was universal, kind of where we are now. So this is the exasperated version of what it looks like to lose everything and somebody taking it to the ultimate and people not understanding. But now you have a whole country of this character. Mm-hmm. Michael Douglas does an outstanding role in this particular film. We don't know his name through the majority of the film, but we find out later. And he basically loses it. He loses his shit.
Both these movies kind of have characters that we see them get to their last straw, but Falling Down is all in one day of like one man's last straw breaks. And it cascades through a series of escalating violences. And yeah, this movie, you're right, these are both formative. I saw them in the 90s when I was like a teenager. And what I thought of them then, having that teenage energy, is different than now. And like, I hadn't seen Falling Down in decades. So I had said, okay, I kind of remember it as he's kind of like this MAGA kind of guy. If this was 2020, he'd be a Trump supporter. But the energy was a little bit different. Like, I remembered everything being intensely racialized in the movie, and in a way it kind of is. But he guys, this is LA, like a year or two after Rodney King. It's a white man kind of going on a quest, a journey through like East LA on his way to Venice Beach, right? So you expect everything to be racially charged, but I think the movie itself made pains to show the character as not racist. I would argue he is in his own way a white supremacist. He did work in the defense industry after all, but he didn't see himself as racist, or the violence he was perpetrating as racist. It did come from more an economical. He had that strong divorced dad energy, and it was coming from a point of economics. And you highlighted that moment where not economically viable. That was a black character who couldn't get a loan from the bank. And our main character, Michael Douglas, he looks at that character with empathy because he can kind of feel that energy. So in a way...
Pause and give a shout out to Vondi Curtis Hall. He's a pretty good director. I like him as an actor and a director, but yes, let's give him a shout out.
So what, as an actor, as a director himself, what do you think made him as a person want to take on that kind of cameo role in this movie?
I don't think he was at the time. I think he grew into that. Later, he actually has directed a couple of films. His wife actually directed the Harriet movie. So they're both writer, director, have gone that trajectory throughout these years. But he was an actor at the time. I think he comes from a theater background. So that, of course, being drawn to that, he was an adult at the time. I can assume that landed somewhere growing up. I can imagine 60s, however old he is now. He's probably about 70, 60, late 60s. So you grew up with an energy that reflects that space. You feel that space and time. And I don't know that I see Michael Douglas's character as a white supremacist. I think he's just a white person. I think that's kind of what we have this otherisms, with
Yeah.
each other so much that, right now the reason why Black Lives Matter is undergirded, or what do you call it, supported so strongly by white people, is because now all of a sudden they can see what we've been saying all along, and that we're not crazy.
Yeah.
And that it is unequal, and that, the Navy guy, excuse me for my rant, but goes off and tries to talk to these people, and, they're beating him with the baton in Portland, know, and, he thought he could use his skin and privilege. I would never go up and walk up on military people with weapons and ask them anything, not a damn thing, right? But he felt like that was something that he could do. And he realized that, hey, you're on the other side now. It's us and them. And so I felt like that this particular character was a reflection of that reality. Just like you said, both of these characters, it's not quite cradle to the grave in Dead Presidents, but it does have a really much longer lifespan, and it kind of gives you much more support for a character. I don't want to move too quickly across these projects, but I will say that Dead Presidents is probably the best Black drama I've ever seen. I have to give my disclaimer that for me it was, so well done in terms of just showing out. If anybody asks, what movie do I need to watch? I'll say Dead Presidents, because it lays it out there on the mat. It's so clear. Instead
of just a day in the life, it is an epic story, which you didn't. I remember as a teenager being kind of disappointed in it because it's marketed as a heist movie. But it's several movies in one almost, because you see them in their prior to Vietnam, then you see the Vietnam era where several of these friends go off to fight in Vietnam, and then you see the post-Vietnam and the world they come back to, with not just having a PTSD, but having PTSD as a Black man in this country, and not getting what you feel is due to you. So he saw in his own short life, he saw his economic situation decline greatly, and his living situation decline after taking the steps that he thought were the right steps. And the most interesting aspect to me is seeing these characters kind of pre-Vietnam and their dynamic, to how that interplays post-Vietnam, and moving into the heist to work together now as adults in the heist.
It was marketed as a heist film, and that was a pure letdown for people who went to go see that kind of, Heat came out, I think, around this time as well, which was the ultimate heist movie, let me tell it. It's completely unrealistic, but, super dope. But when it comes to what you said in terms of how it goes across decades, or a decade, or however long this takes place over, you can replace that now with mass incarceration and people coming home from prison, and people and how many Black families have lost men to prison, in the prison system, for ridiculous crimes, for weed, for possession of drugs, or whatever the case may be. Yes, albeit illegal at the time, completely unfairly prosecuted. I'm not for, saying people shouldn't be prosecuted. I say people should be prosecuted equally. So if that's what we're doing, then let's do it for everybody, right? So then we wouldn't have this disproportionate amount. But, the devastation that Vietnam had on Black men, and them actually going, there was a controversy with Muhammad Ali going, and, this meaningless war was so violent and so disproportionately Black and Hispanics and, poor people going. We know that our current Cheeto, he did not go, our burned up Cheeto now. He found a way out of it, right? He's a draft dodger.
Yeah.
And a lot of people couldn't do that. And they kind of talk about that in the opening scene of the movie. about how you can draft the Dodge. And I think that Chris Tucker's character did try to draft the Dodge. He went to college and flunked out.
It didn't work,
and
yeah.
So he ended up, in the same special units force with his friend. And, it was, these are kids. So I think they tried to make that connection to show like, these are young people who think they know what they're doing. He's going because he wants to travel. You don't travel to the swamp and kill people that you don't know. That's
exactly, crazy. Yeah.
That's insane.
And those were some of my favorite moments that came up, and there's kind of a subtlety to them. It didn't, but when they find the member of their team disemboweled, and there's the flyer that says, black man, this isn't your war. That was like a real thing that happened, and the Viet Cong actually really did try to identify with certain aspects of the soldiers, and they had the politics to know that, hey, your own country's at war with you as well. And then across on this side, they kind of had the stand-ins for the Black Panther Party. It was the Nat Turner Brigade, something like that. I think they called them in this movie. They were saying the same thing. It's like, look, the Vietnamese people aren't the enemy of the black man here. So I like that the movie identified that. Many of our protagonists didn't quite make that connection, but I think that's an important connection to make, and I appreciated how this movie stood back and kind of judged the war in a subtle way. They just presented you with the information where you can make your own call. But we subtly see those things, like when they get back from war, we see that Chris Tucker's character Skip, he's got a sickness where he's itching all the time, and it's not just heroin addiction or drug addiction, it's the Agent Orange. He's been poisoned from Agent Orange, which was a common thing to happen to infantrymen. And just the PTSD. So many movies show you the war, but they don't show you the PTSD. And this movie showed you that.
Yeah, I've had friends who were in Iraq, and I always wonder. I'm like, so what do you do? In between coming here and come to the battlefield? They're like, nothing. You just get on the plane and go home. I'm like, there's no in between, like decompression, you know what I'm saying, moments to like kind of like reacclimate yourselves to, regular life, normal life, going to the grocery store and the Walmart. And they're like, no, you're there and then you're home. And I find that to be traumatic for anybody, and so many people have gone back, and that's why they serve multiple tours, because it's almost better to have your mind busy with doing something and being able to protect yourself. You can't walk down the street armed to the teeth, you know what I mean? So you can do that in Iraq if you're serving a tour. So that kind of trauma is trauma, whether or not you're experiencing it in gang life or whether you're experiencing it from war or whatever the case may be. But yeah, you said it. It was, it starts out as a coming of age movie, right? And we see this wonderful budding, this kid trying to find himself and this woman trying to find her man. They're not really seeing eye to eye in terms of that, but they like each other and seeing where that's going, and that you want that to happen. You're rooting for that. But it changes. It changes so many times with the layers. And, I thought that was a very significant way to kind of look at, oppression, I guess is what systemic oppression, even all the way to the end with Charlie Sheen, like, you're not a Marine,
Oh, Martin Sheen, yeah.
Oh, did I say Charlie? Oops.
Yeah. Martin Sheen as the judge.
They're all the same people to me. I'm sorry, they look exactly alike.
They have a similar sheen to their face.
Yeah, right. They like all have the Sheen face.
Especially Joe Estevez, looks identical to Martin Sheen to me. But yeah, the judge, he called it, like, Anthony, when he's in court, he kind of has an outburst of anger, and he says, like, look, I was, fighting for this country, killing as I was supposed to. And Martin Sheen, handed him his ass and was like, there's good killing and there's bad killing, and anyone who would do what you did is, not a true Marine, which, I would say is not the case. This movie shows you that there is if you kill unjustly under the flag of the U.S., then that's still good killing. You can, in the jungle, saw off a person's head and put it in a bag, and you're still a good person. But, you know, if you come home and you kill a cop trying to get some money to support your family, you're a bad person. And life's not black and white like that. There are circumstances that drive people to do crime. And this movie recognizes that and says, hey, these are specific circumstances where someone took a prescribed path to do the right thing, to do the good thing, and they just reach, when that doesn't work out for so long, they reach a breaking point, especially if they're extremely psychologically traumatized by all the things they were doing that are supposed to be good things.
Right, and you don't know what's the end result, right? So I think one of the biggest, excuse me for I keep thinking I'm turning my phone down, so bad. One of the things taking it back to Falling Down is that they didn't mention, but I think he was a vet. So I felt like he had PTSD. He worked in the Defense Department. Yeah. But he had some sort of traumas. His mother, alluded to it, that he had problems and he wasn't okay. What you're seeing is the tip of the iceberg in Falling Down. Yeah. Right. Seeing somebody that literally is in traffic and like, fuck it, I can't take this shit no motherfucking mo. Yeah. Right. So that is what happens in Falling Down. And this is the path that we're going to get to get there. It was much more of a slow burn with Dead Presidents in that story trajectory. And you get to, all of the things service his ultimate demise in the end. So it's the same exact character. I think we have a lot less sympathy for Michael Douglas's character, unfortunately, which we probably should. And I think that's where we kind of mess up, is to say like, oh, they call it the pity Olympics or whatever they call it. But it's like both are equally messed up. I'm not saying you can fix anything. That we don't know exactly what happened to him to what, made that cheese slip off the cracker, but we could assume that probably some messed up stuff happened to him as well, right? Yeah, and if the Dead Presidents was just the third act where it was the planning of the heist and the heist, you might not have as much sympathy for Anthony's character. But as it stands, Falling Down's almost like a dark fantasy where it's just very visceral, scene after scene of escalating violence from this person who has snapped. And yeah, he worked in the Defense Department, may have been a vet. But the connective tissue to me is these are two people who seemed like they wanted to just be good, providing family people, and their pride fit into that. So Anthony, he has his partner, his baby mama, telling him, you're not providing for us. So that's why, the sugar daddy is still coming around, who was there when he was off at war, and providing. And in Falling Down, his ex-wife actually got a restraining order against him. So these are two men who have their pride, who are wannabe providers, and it's the external circumstances of life they kind of blame for not standing in their way of being the providers they want to be. Wanda was her name, his significant other, and Anthony. They had a very combative relationship. I think that they did not have, it was kind of a relationship that they felt obligated to after his tour, right? So we're trying to figure it out, but now we got this kid, so we're kind of stuck together. And Cuddy, of course, he's dropping gems all over the place. I love Cuddy. I wanted to see the Cuddy movie, actually. No, he was, please. He spit game in that movie. He didn't say anything wrong, but he was never right, but he didn't say anything wrong either. I know, right? We try to make everything so black and white, and I think that's why I was drawn to both of these movies. But it's not very black and white. It's very gray. Yeah. And what he said to him in terms of how he had to take care of his woman while he was away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that tension, that friction that it brought to the relationship, and that he tried to compartmentalize it and deal with it on top of losing his job, on top of, having PTSD, on top of, just the messed up overall situation of the environment that he was in. And it was probably the first time in a movie that I saw a couple argue, and I understood the violence of that argument. I'm always either like, you can't hit a woman. No, you can't. You shouldn't. Nobody ever should. But it was the first time that I felt like that was an impassioned, passionate situation.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's more often the case. And we got to find better ways in relationships to not antagonize. But, when you're in film, it's very rare, people are trying to do music swells and they're trying to, emote emotions. But that came from a real place. You know what I'm saying? Like, what did you think about that scene in particular when he kind of like cracks?
Well, I like the way you put it, because you're right. And when you see in movie violence, and unless it's like pre 1960s when men were slapping women left and right in movies, if a man hits a woman in a movie, it always kind of is telling the audience this is a bad, evil character. But we have a protagonist with nuance to them. So I would say the movie earned that moment in the sense that it did all the groundwork to show you that this character, what this character has gone through, to have him have the PTSD. He's a damaged person, essentially. So he's not the person you would card as being a wife beater, and that's probably not in his character. If he was to live out a whole long life, he probably would. In that relationship, probably that might be the only time he ever hits her, But it was that moment that was.
He didn't hit her. He didn't hit her. I think it probably called for him to hit her, and it made more sense, in the terms of how the scene played out with these characters, because they did a very convincing job. I was scared for her, and she looked scared for real. You know what I mean? Like I felt like there was some method acting going on here, and that I was watching something that I didn't, I shouldn't have been watching. So it was almost more powerful when he choked her. I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is so intense.
Yeah, and you're right. And that's like, if your goal as a filmmaker is to make a protagonist be sympathetic, that's not something you put in the movie. But to understand how a person who's quote unquote a good person gets to that point where they can instigate a heist, kill someone in a heist, perpetrating violence upon your loved ones might be a component of that, because he has reached psychological breaking point after psychological breaking point. So I think you just have to look at it as this is a movie that's trying to have three-dimensional characters, where you're not. That would be the opposite of his save the cat moment. That would be, his kill the cat moment, where you're like, hey, he's a good character who has done bad things and will do bad things.
When they're getting ready for the heist, and he recruits her sister, and he's like, I ain't fucking with your sister no more. It kind of like, he's not apologetic about that moment at all. It was almost like she earned it, and we agree. Not that we believe that we stand up, you know what I mean? We don't agree with it, but we're like, yeah, you guys probably shouldn't be together. That's not working out. I think that was what it was. So, not to put too fine a point on it, but I wanted to relate that to the difference in violence that happens in Falling Down at the end of the movie, where that's the climax, right?
Right.
His whole entire mission. Sorry, spoiler alert. 20 years later, good luck. Okay. He gets there to that pier, and his sole purpose is to kill. I don't know if it's the wife himself, and the kid. But I don't feel like we earned it there. I don't feel like it was just kind of like almost a letdown in terms of how that resolution comes about. So it's kind of it should show you that I felt like they spent way too much time in the cop storyline and not enough time in the Michael Douglas storyline. And I'm so sorry, guys, that I don't have their names because
it was Robert Duvall played the cop on his last day.
Oh yeah, I mean I know Robert Duvall's name. I mean the character.
Sergeant Martin Pendergrast.
Pendergrast,
yeah.
Pendergrast. You kept calling him Pendergrast. Yeah. So I felt like we spent a lot of time on that, and that really wasn't the story. Nor was it interesting in terms of they didn't do anything with it. Like, you know.
Well, if the story's about, if you look at the story thematically as like Michael Douglas is wanting, he has divorced dad energy. Robert Duvall has like the hen picking wife who has to whisper on the phone, "Oh, I'm sorry, honey, I'm still at work," and so yada yada. So like, yeah, his wife's character, that aspect of his character was, I didn't know how to feel about that because his wife was just like awful to him, and then he had this weird kind of relationship with his protege, younger woman, right, who kind of looked up to him, and the movie was almost trying to tell you like, oh, if only this guy got divorced, he could be, you know, having a good time with his younger coworker kind of thing. And
yeah, that didn't even match. Like, what?
And the movie like hated his wife pretty much, and went to pains to tell you how much the movie hated his wife.
I feel like the whole movie hated all women. Actually, there are no redeeming characters for women in this movie at all. I didn't care for the female cop. I didn't care for the wife. I didn't care for his wife. You know, so, and those are the only primary three in the film. So I just think I blame white screenwriters for that. But,
yeah. Or male screenwriters especially. I mean,
excuse me. That's what I meant.
Yeah, Detective Sandra Torres. Her character was almost like a Mary Sue, or she was too idealized to like what a police sergeant would kind of fantasize about.
If we're gonna remake movies, I would love to see a Falling Down, 2.0 or whatever, 2020. I would love to see that movie again, because I think you can kind of like really, I mean, there's no shortage of material for a character like that now. So, but it was, I do understand the themes. I think it was, of course, in terms of getting from the 110 freeway to Venice in a day, that's a little...
Well, that's why I call it a fantasy, Yeah,
it's super, it's sci-fi, right?
It's hard enough in a car to make that journey in a day, but he's just hoofing it on foot there.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Maybe they don't know Los Angeles, but okay, I can buy it. I'll buy it.
I think it had a bit more meat to chew on than I had remembered. Watching as a teenager, you just get a thrill out of like not the kills, but the scenes of violence and stuff. But seeing it now, I was happy to see it that I didn't have to see the character just as this racist guy. Like the scene where he confronts the white supremacist. That white supremacist character was almost like what my memory of Michael Douglas's character was, having not seen the movie for so long. So it was kind of, when the white supremacist sees himself in Michael Douglas and identifies with him, it was a joy to see Michael Douglas kill him.
Like, hey, that's not me.
Yeah, to say like, hey, I'm not you, actually, like, so I liked that. And then I the other part I loved is when he really brings his Karen energy, and he's in the burger joint, and he wants to speak to the manager because they don't have breakfast, like that.
Oh yeah, it's totally my favorite part. Yeah, for sure. No, that definitely rang true.
Yeah.
You get this little puny burger.
We've all been there when the restaurant doesn't have exactly what you want, and he takes it to that extreme to let me speak to you, the manager. But it's funny, but that's a moment that also turns poignant when he looks at a kid sitting there and sees the fear in the kid's eyes. And so it's just a quick exchange, a cut between them but you realize that now he's seeing like, oh shit, I'm being like kind of scary and bad, and he kind of like cools off and backs down in that moment.
Well, I think that's it overall. That's why I think he doesn't realize he's crazy. Mm-hmm. Like he doesn't realize like he's going a step too far until we get to midpoint of the movie, and he embraces it when he's out there shooting bazookas at the Caltrans workers.
Yeah.
I think the whole entire movie is a great in concept. Maybe it was fine in execution back in the 90s, but it doesn't really hold up over time. It's kind of a little ridiculous, but in theory, in terms of how it plays out, it is pretty much, I think everybody can imagine that time when they walked into a burger joint and you was like, hey, can I get the fill in the blank? And they were like, oh yeah, I'm at the El Pollo Loco, but we don't have chicken. Okay, I remember that day.
Or like they've been advertising Dr. Pepper cream soda on television, and everywhere I've been going, I've been looking for Dr. Pepper cream soda for like the last month, and no one has it. So it's like, why are you putting these ads out there, and I can't find it?
It sounds disgusting. I hate Dr. Pepper. It tastes like medicine. So let's move on from thinking about that experience. It's gross. Ugh.
Now, Dr. Pepper is an excellent beverage, and cream soda is an excellent beverage, and the marriage of the two is something I very much desire.
Damaged. But I'll forgive you. I'll forgive you for that. Do you feel like they earned the heist? Do you feel like in Dead Presidents that it was a crazy idea? Like it was...
No, and that's where like I feel like this movie definitely shouldn't have been marketed as a heist movie. But I could have definitely used more of the heist elements leading up to it. I would have liked them seen the team do like one crime like leading up to the heist, more about kind of walking you through planning the heist. They had one kind of scene explaining, and then he wrestles with it, and then he decides to do it, and then they're just doing it. So I really appreciated how we know how the team came together and the dynamics of the team, because we saw them in Vietnam, pre-Vietnam, and there was some poignancy to the reversal of the Skip and Cleon characters, where in Vietnam Skip froze, Chris Tucker, he froze up, but then during the heist Cleon freezes up. So they had that interesting character build up. But the heist, I could have used like a lot more heist, especially because they have this super cool makeup and look that is, so iconic from that movie poster and stuff. And that to me, I see the tie-in with you're putting on the war paint in Vietnam. I would have liked to see just more of this heist.
It's funny you say that. I think that the clunkiness of it was the point. Right, it was a desperate move. It wasn't that were criminals. They're not criminals. They want to stick it to the man, and this is the way you can stick it to the man, and hurry up and come up so you can build. Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a train robbery, I guess. It wasn't really necessarily. This wasn't heat. Right. This is not professional criminals trying to get out there and do it. Chris Tucker, my favorite quote in the movie, and that movie was, you might as well put an ad in the paper, you're going to get everybody, because trying to bring everybody in to make sure that they had enough backup, enough cover. And, with their buddy being this quote unquote weapons expert, ballistics or whatever, fire, whatever he was, but he's a pyromaniac.
Blew up the whole truck.
And he had a great time. That was worth his the price of tea. And so, what it showed to me more than anything, and I think that what you said is why, not for nothing, the Vietnam element of Dead Presidents was kind of trash to me. And
shot in Florida.
That was why it was trash to me.
I wish that looked better, but
I do wish that part. I mean, it just kind of didn't it didn't add up to the rest of the film. Like it didn't kind of give that element. I think it wasn't necessary. It was a little more extended than it needed to be. But I understood the point of putting it in there and to give that relationship to those characters, so you understood those, that dynamic that you said. It kind of had a through line. When they come together and you realize, and I think the reason why I cared so much about this heist was because I understood that those people came together, but they weren't necessarily friends, right? So this is like, that somebody's going to fall. It's not like, the cartel or something like that where you were all loyal to one another. These were just people who were like it's a means to an end, right? So we knew that Cleon was going to snitch as soon as he got caught.
Yeah, Cleon's like such a frustrating character. Yeah.
But such a good character, right?
Yeah, and we saw that actor in Queen and Slim. So, what's his name? Bokeem, yeah. So he's a delight as an actor, but that character is like,
Yes. So many good characters in this. Keith David.
Well, Keith David, I'll watch him in anything. He's like, love Keith David. You didn't mention Terrence. We haven't even talked about Terrence Howard yet.
I know.
And like, why does Terrence Howard have to be so Terrence Howard in all his movies? Now,
this was iconic Terrence Howard. This was what made Terrence Howard Terrence Howard.
I would have paid the price of the ticket just to hear him say the way he pronounced man. Man. I can't say how he said it.
Yeah, no. Terrence Howard, this made him who he was. Like, this was his coming out party right here.
Oh man. And he
so good.
And kind of like when we saw him in Best Man, he's the character that gets to like tell you the truth from the beginning and be like righteous, but be a total asshole at the same time as being righteous, because he tells him from the beginning, that this is or when he returns, he tells him, that was a white man's war.
And there's so many gems, and it wasn't preachy. I didn't feel like it was preachy. It was really just kind of like spin game.
Yeah.
All around. I think the only person that it didn't dawn on was Anthony, who had this really idealistic view of what the world was.
Yeah.
His mother tried to tell him, his brother tried to tell him, his father was henpecked. So he said nothing. But, it's kind of like it was a coming of age story. It really just was. He had to figure this stuff out on his own, and the tragedy, there's just comedies and tragedies, right? There's no in between.
Yeah. And
this was a tragedy, and the tragic is that the realization of him finding this out, he's in prison at the end, right?
And I appreciated your perspective on the heist, because I like what you made me realize is like, crime in real life isn't cool like it always is in a heist movie. And so that this ended, we were set up to expect a cool heist movie. It had all the elements of that if you just saw the advertising. But then when you get into it, it's just like it holds off the heist till the end, and it barely gives it to you. And then it's like, this actually isn't cool. Most heists are planned poorly. They don't go off as planned, and everything turns to shit.
In the end,
yeah,
right. And that's why it was so realistic to me, because it's like, no, this shit is not sexy.
Yeah.
Like at the end, we're running from the cops. Even if you do get away with money, it's blood money. I think Set It Off did the same thing. It's kind of like a lesson, to the word to the wise. Like, if you pay attention to these, you can kind of like, do as I say, not as I do. And I think when it comes to Black films, you end up having to be heavy-handed on the preachy side, but it just shows you, it's like, look, make your decisions from here, right? You're not, you're not Robert De Niro in Heat. You're not Val Kilmer. You cannot blend in with society. You're going to stick out no matter what. So you do this, even though my friends were in college at the time, we were wearing dead presidents makeup, to the Halloween party. So it was, we definitely saw that part as iconic.
You just admitted to doing whiteface. You're canceled now.
What are you gonna do? Cancel me, please, everybody. Let's get You can start pouring it out like Nino did in New Jack City. Cancel this.
One thing about 90s movies is they always had great soundtracks, and Dead Presidents is an example. New Jack City was the one, though. That was a great soundtrack.
Yes, I love New Jack City soundtrack. Dead Presidents, actually the best soundtrack ever. How about we get into that part? The Isaac Hayes opening is who was the original score? That was
Danny Elfman, the score. I didn't love the score to the movie, but all the incidental music was good. Yeah.
The score was my favorite part of the movie.
Really?
It was actually my favorite. It's the score and the soundtrack. They actually made a version number 2. There's 2 Dead President soundtracks, and I listen to them both to this day as if it didn't just happen. So all that to say that I don't want to leave out the element of his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Wanda. I feel like that particular expectation to, she's seeing her friends and they're in love and they're getting married. And she felt this obligation. She held on her own accord, of course.
Yeah.
Apparently she was, this beauty. And well sought after, and she was kind of bitter as well. I don't think that she holds enough of the blame in this particular movie, even though she's, I guess, an antagonist to him, throughout. But I feel like that she holds a lot of resentment, and I don't like looking at things as bad and good. But in this particular thing, I just think that. You saw the crush from the little sister that she kind of was having on him, and it's like, in another world, you want to see them hook up. What does that look like, right? And so it was just very intricate in comparison. How I was looking at it in terms of how the women characters mesh up. These characters were so much more realistic, and they were so much more. Actualized and human, whether it's the mom who we only got to see for a hot second, and then the 2 sisters, but they were actually very real.
And the sisters, Delilah and Juanita, I wanted to see more of both of them. They were rounded out characters, and even in the fights between Anthony and Juanita, I felt she was being harsh on him, being that, he had PTSD. He did have a job, but at the same time I empathized with her, because they did kind of feel an obligation to return to their relationship, even though if it hadn't been for the war, they probably would have broken up long before. They both were giving it a shot, and they both were in it. It's hard to make a living in this world, and it's hard to make a living when your only skill is, killing people half the world away. So you could say she didn't have enough empathy for him, and she was too harsh on him. But at the same time, what we didn't see is when he was gone, she was in a war of her own. She was in a war of how do you raise a child as a single mother where the father isn't even sending you letters anymore, and you don't know what's going on. So you
don't know what your relationship's going to be when he gets home, right?
So they don't show it, but she was in a war of survival, and she did what she had to do. So in a sense, it wasn't fair for Anthony to judge her or question her for, dating a man who was providing for them when they were gone. She did what she had to do, but she was also.
I don't feel like he judged her, though. I feel like he tried to. Understand and suppress it. But he couldn't get over it. You know what I mean? He couldn't get past it. He couldn't he was trying, but Cuddy wasn't trying to let him, right? He was like.
He wasn't going to give him that pride of being like. Everyone was saying you're going to take this money, and no matter what you do.
And I think, it's so funny, and I related this to men coming home from prison now, because a lot of men are coming home from prison because they're letting them out because they got the COVID, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that you just don't know is what people experience behind bars. First of all, sitting in your house, people are freaking out, right? We're dealing with quarantine and, not going out and doing the things that we're used to doing, much more than we were before. And luckily, my household is very peaceful and calm. I get along with my family and everybody's great. But I know that that's not the case necessarily in every place, and that every place is not comfortable to go in. Now, think about it. I have a cousin that has been in prison for the bulk of our lives. We grew up like two peas in a pod. We were 10 months apart. And but he's been in solitary confinement for so many years. You know what I mean? And he's probably there right now as we speak. And you just lose people in your heart that are not gone, right? They're here. And so when people come home from war, from being gone and being absent from people's lives, the other person who they're coming home to has no idea what that person has had to endure to even get back to them, right? So like you said, that she can't hold him responsible, but he also couldn't. So I think that was the dynamic that we saw in both of those relationships, was neither person able to really empathize with what the other person had been through, and that clash of both of those things. I just feel like we just don't see that in movies anymore. I feel like that is so hard to create and be honest and tell those type of stories. Like I can't recall anything remotely close in recent years that kind of like gives you that much clash and resolve.
Dead Presidents didn't try to sensationalize these adult issues of people coming home from war or prison, and both the characters of Anthony and Juanita, they were adults with good intentions but still had this conflict, and that's something to be appreciated for the movie, as it shows you like the harsh realities but doesn't sensationalize it, kind of like Falling Down does, where they go, here's the conflict, let's turn it up to 10 and, right, send Michael Douglas spinning off like a top. We were talking about the sisters, and to me, the character of Delilah, I wanted to see more of her, because you see her as a young, precocious young woman who has a crush on Anthony, but then the next time you see her, she's a righteous member of the Nat Turner Brigade, wrapped up in Black Power. She's educated in all of the literature of the movement, and she's also like a leader of the movement, and I thought that was really cool. But then I'm still struggling to see what is her motivation in this heist, other than sticking it to the man and pulling off
crush on Anthony.
Do you think she's still harboring that crush on him?
Oh, absolutely. Those crushes don't die, right? And especially your first love, it just is one of those things that it looked like she didn't have a small crush. Yeah. She had a big crush. When he came home, she still had the same crush. She met up with him. She had the same crush. And so they kind of like gave you those breadcrumbs. They did it, the obligation, sticking it to the man, and I know weapons. They threw that in as a side thing, but it was mostly because she felt for her brother-in-law and wanted to do whatever she could to kind of like, hey, do something for the movement, but also to see if she could help her. And it was not thought out. It goes back to what you said, that it would have been interesting to see a lot more of them as opposed to, Vietnam. Right? Yeah,
well, her character divorced from the whole heist and getting shot by the police. Her whole character would have had an interesting trajectory.
Absolutely, that would have been a very fascinating. I wonder if different renditions of the script had that storyline in it. You know what I mean? Like, this feels like a very long script, like, the standard 120 pages in terms of density, in terms of how thick that concept was. So it could have been in there and got
excised out for time and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, because subtextually, I know her character had a lot of going on. And I think that's something you can put in the positive column. At least this movie left you wanting more of its ensemble of characters. And each character did seem to have a rich backstory in life, even if it didn't make it to the screen.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of the contrast of these two movies, right? One had twice the amount of money to do it, and the other had a lot less, but they were able to pull out a lot more from it. And not for nothing, it's something to be said about brothers as directors. I love the Coen brothers. The Hughes brothers were just as talented in terms of their storytelling abilities, in terms of how to tell those stories. So it's just something that we don't get to see too often. Two minds are better than one when it comes to directing. I even like who's the Matrix sisters?
Wachowskis, yeah.
The Wachowski sisters, right? I think they're.
Isn't that also like the DGA makes it so hard to allow people to have co-directing credit? That's why we don't see it more often.
They do. They make it. You don't see it as much now at all. You see it a lot in EPs, so you'll see a writer team.
Yeah.
You'll see it in writers' rooms, but you'll very rarely see it in directing, just because of probably how they pay the royalties. If you really want to come down to the capitalism of it all. Makes it more difficult for them. They look, we ain't about to change nothing. We always talk about story. We never talk about filmmaking. And I just think that Dead Presidents had, its own look. It did not make me ever feel like I wasn't in that era. I think it starts in 1968.
Yeah.
I always felt like I was right there. It felt like a period piece. So.
All the period stuff was great for me. Vietnam to me looked really whack. Initially I was like, are they shooting this in Griffith Park? So I looked it up. Well, no, they're shooting it in Florida, which is you could tell they just put a styrofoam temple over here, then put some palm trees here. They're like, okay, it's Vietnam now. I was kind of but but
don't do it. Please.
Budgetary issues, I feel for them.
I mean, they did what they could with that budget, right? They worked the hell out of it.
The period stuff looked great.
For a person like me, who looks at it, right? We have a president who's done it literally. If you can't get rid of a president who's done the amount of things that he's done,
oh yeah,
then what chance do we have of anybody getting, anyone out of office who is harming Americans, right?
Or Bush, and him and Bush too. It's
absolutely.
We don't. Absolutely. Why do we even have these checks on balance of power and checks on control when they don't appear to be working at all?
I feel the same way about people who have been in that circle, right? So we'll find out, look, Trump just sprung every single person that got prosecuted, right? All the people who were convicted, they served 2 whole days and let's let them go, right? The people who cheated and got their children free tuition into college, they were in jail for 5 seconds and now they're out. Yeah. So, we don't treat people the same way. This goes back to our movies, right? Yeah. They're presidents. If you're, the guy who's, now you can be at the end of the pier with a gun and them not come and tackle you and shoot you and kill you with a sniper, right? You know what I'm saying? If he was black, he would have been dead, right? What are we doing? So Anthony, who, commits this crime of obligation, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, he gets book thrown at him. Yeah. Right?
They gave him the harshest sentence they possibly could have given him.
Right? And so it's just so to me, I'm not saying that you're wrong. You're not wrong. I'm saying that the end result, we already seen this movie play out. And what happens at the end is they get away with it. And so what are we doing? Okay, let's focus on something else, because I'm not going to sit here and waste my energy.
You have to choose your battles, right? What's the most pragmatic battle you can win? Just today, we see protesters at Mayor Garcetti's house, because we have, we still have police violence. We're still seeing incidents every day in LA and across the country where police are beating people down in the streets. And we're facing an eviction crisis where the moratorium's up and landlords are starting to evict people. So that's a battle. Someone could easily, I could go out today in the street and join the protest at Garcetti's house.
You have to play it out to the end. I'm not saying that anything that I'm focusing on, because right now I have to focus on figuring out, they've thrown this shit in my lap and they're like, hey, you're going to be a parent and you're going to have to work full time. So now you're going to be a teacher, a parent, and work full time. Good luck. We're,
simultaneously.
And we just threw this on you. So for me, my focus is totally different. Of course, I have a master's in business, and they talk about opportunity costs. You have to choose to focus your attention on the thing that's going to give you the best result. Yeah.
I think we talked about these two movies, Falling Down and Dead Presidents 2.
So you think they're pretty close, right? Pretty close in relation.
Thematically?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, these are, it's a good double feature, these two movies. Both tragedies. They'd be very different movies if they're made today. They have, Falling Down with its divorced dad, slightly MAGA-adjacent energy, would not be kind of a treat to watch in cinemas today. And Dead Presidents, we've had someone who's 21 years old today has lived through constant war being on the background of their whole life. So if you made this movie today, maybe it'd be addressing Afghanistan or Iraq, something like that.
Yeah. I still don't know what the launching point for Vietnam was, but from what I understand, nobody is. It just kind of was like, yeah, we're going to go start that. But Vietnam in particular messed up a lot of people. And when they came home, they didn't come home to anything. No warm reception. They came home to more animosity. So it was an interesting backdrop. I don't think that the Iraq War kind of had the same controversy. It was controversial, of course, but not in terms of just being kind of a leper when you come home, right?
You're right. Well, the culture digested that whole era differently, that whole war differently, but I think there's definitely similarities other than, as far as the U.S., why it got involved and what they're seeking to get out of it, influence on the world stage and access to certain resources and whatnot, and the futility of it all. But I think the difference with Vietnam is people were watching war on television, broadcast on video, and kind of seeing the horrors firsthand. So I think even though now we have round-the-clock cable news, as we get into these new wars, after a week or two, they just kind of stop showing it to you, even though we have greater ability to show it. So it's become something the broader culture is just encouraged to pretend isn't happening, and without a draft that's not affecting as many people directly. So it's very easy to forget, but I think it's always there underlying our whole institutional system, is that we're a country that does unjust war and often loses too. It does a bad job at even being the warmongers, but I
honestly think we're right there right now. I think this next generation is going to experience a warfare that has never seen before. We're so vulnerable right now, and that kind of vulnerability is just opens up to kind of a different exposure, whether it's a civil war here on our own grounds amongst ourselves, we're gonna be fighting amongst family, or somebody's gonna come in and give it to us. But either way, I know that the direction, I pray to God that I'm wrong, but it just feels that we're sitting on a powder keg, And that type of kind of innocence is going to be lost with this next generation, and I don't even think they know it. They don't realize that we're at a tipping point. People are buying guns like nobody's business, and they're arming themselves, and so and who can blame them, because the police ain't coming. Now they're an antagonistic force, so it's just kind of like, where are you? So these two movies kind of like show it, as a precursor to present day.
All right, well, thanks for joining us on this conversation of dead presidents and falling down. Until we see you next time, you can always make suggestions, cancel me, tell us where we're wrong, talk movies with us on the Facebook group of Black and White Movies. And then we're on Twitter and Instagram, BNW Movies Pod. You can always email us at blackandwhitemovies.podcast@gmail.com. Just yell at us in any of those avenues. We love it. So until next time, thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, Jared.
All right, toodaloo.
Hasta la bye-bye.